In this tutorial, we're going to put color on this bottle in the form of liquid inside of it, and then some colors that would be reflected on the glass surface from the background image. We'll begin by choosing a color that we would like the beverage inside to be. I'm going to grab an orange that kind of goes with the lighter colors on the background image, and I'm going to put a new layer in. I'm going to make a selection of the bottle itself by holding down the Command key and clicking on the thumbnail of the bottle on its layer in the layer window. Now I don't want the color to go out to the edges of the bottle because there's always a glass edge when you look directly at a bottle because of the thickness of the glass itself. I'll go to Select, Modify, Contract, and I'm setting it for 10, and I will click OK. Now I'm going to fill that new layer with that color by holding down the Option key and hitting the Delete key. I'll deselect. I'm going to go to my Move tool, and I'm holding the Shift and I'm going to hit plus on the keyboard to find a blend mode that I might want to work with the color I've got. Now that I've found the color that I want to use for this, I'm going to put a bit of a Gaussian blur on this to soften the edges of it. I'll go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and I'll make it about 10. And I'm going to get my pen tool now because I want the fluid inside the bottle to stop at a certain point in the neck. So I'll go in and draw a shape across it. Close out my pen path, right click inside and choose Make Selection. Once I've done that, I'm going to click on the layer mask icon, but I need to invert this selection so that what I'll be keeping is the orange that's inside the bottle and not in the neck. So I'll go to Select Inverse and click on my layer mask icon. Now that we've got the color inside our bottle, we need to pick up some other colors from the background and have them reflect on the bottle as well. I'll start by adding a new layer. Command Shift N on the keyboard or click on your new layer icon at the bottom of the layer window. I'll name this Yellow. Right. I'll get my eyedropper and sample some of the yellow that's in the sunset in the image behind. I'll make a selection of the bottle once again by holding down the Command key and clicking on the thumbnail of the bottle. I'm going to reduce the edge of this as well by going to Modify, Contract, 10. I'll get my brush. I'm using a brush that's about 500 pixels. It's 100% opacity. And then I'll paint along the right-hand side of the bottle. I'll deselect, and now I'll hit V on the keyboard and I'll go through my blend modes to look for a color that will work well and give me a bit of a brighter yellow on that side and without losing the actual logo. If you decide to use a color that does block the logo in any capacity of the bottle design you've made, you can always add a layer mask, and then you can very carefully with a brush go in and eliminate where it might be covering up the label that might not have that color on it. So I'll quickly go in and do that. I'm going to apply the layer mask, and then I'm also going to put a little bit of a blur on this as well. So I'll go up to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. I'll keep the same blur setting and click OK. Now I'm going to add a little bit of the color that appears at the top of the horizon to the left-hand side of the bottle. It appears to be almost kind of a pinkish. So I'll go into my color picker and I'll get a pinkish color. I'll click OK. I'll add a new layer, pink left. I'll make a selection based on the shape of the bottle thumbnail by holding down the Command key and clicking on it. I'll go into Modify, Contract, 10. I'll hit B on the keyboard, and then I'll go in and add that color to the left-hand side of the bottle. Deselect. Going to my Move tool, I'll hold the Shift key and hit plus on the keyboard to go through my options. And once I've found a color that I want, I'll save. I'm going to drop the opacity for this. And I'm going to put a layer mask on, and I'll clean off where it might be covering up the logo. Now, because this is a tutorial, time permitting, I'm just roughing this in. I would expect you to go in and take your time, do the best job you can. But this will give you a general idea of how to approach this. I'll add a layer mask to that, and now I'm going to get my brush, and I might eliminate a little of it following the contour of the bottle. Lastly, we're going to put the white reflection that we'd see on a cylindrical or spherical surface where the light hits most intensely. I'll add a new layer, and I'll choose white from my toolbar. I'll command click on the bottle icon once again in the layer window, and I'll get my brush and I'll paint on either side depending on where I'd like the final reflection to fall. Once I've filled the reflection with white, I'll go to my marquee tool and I'll move my marquee to the right till I determine the thickness I want, and then I'll hit delete on the keyboard. I'll now go back to my Move tool and use the same right arrow to move that white bar into the interior of the bottle itself. I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and now I'll change the number to 8. While I'm on my Move tool, I'll hold a Shift key and hit plus or minus on the keyboard, and I'm looking for a blend mode that will work well with the colors of the bottle. Once I've found that, I'll put my layer mask on. I'm going to get my brush, and I'm going to go in and reduce the amount of white that is falling up in the area of the neck. That will conclude the color aspect of our 3D bottle.